Most of us really do hope the people that we love will someday find their way back to God. But how do we go beyond merely hoping to actually helping bring people back to God? If we can learn how to better love our neighbors, I know we can change the world. With simple and intentional action, let's bless our neighbor.
Well, good morning. I want to ask you right out of the gate, what is your favorite story? Whether it's a novel, a movie, a TV, whatever it might be, wherever you find it, what is your favorite story? The one you go back to all the time. Now, for me, I kind of got to think about this a little bit, and I love Saving Private Ryan. I love that story. I love Band of Brothers. Now, before you think, just like war movies and stuff, I'm really excited because in December, every year, they show It's a Wonderful Life. And I really like that movie. I really love watching that movie. But my all-time favorite story, probably because I was so young when I saw it, was Star Wars. Star Wars, the original Star Wars. Somebody, there you go. All right, at least one. At least one. And if you lived in Phoenix, I went to the original Cine Capri. So some of you know what that is. Huge screen, like 1,000 seats. There it is, the 1970s movie poster. Your favorite, my favorite. I love Star Wars. I was about 7 years old, and there was something about this whole saving the galaxy, rescuing the princess, Luke Skywalker, the hero, that just sucked me in. And I thought, this is the best story I think I've ever heard. And then later I found out it was like the 4th out of 9th, or I don't know how all that worked out, but I was like, when I was 7, this was the best story I had ever seen, ever been a part of. So take a minute, you don't have to tell me, but think about your favorite story. When maybe you read it, like I said, maybe you watched it, maybe it was a movie, whatever it was, your favorite story. And the reason I want you to do that is because we're talking about stories today. We're talking about life stories today. And I asked somebody in our church here, Jennifer Dybels, a published author here in our church. She taught creative writing. She's written a book that's been published. She's working on another book that's being published. And I asked her, what is it that makes a great story a great story? I mean, why is it that some stories we could care less about? Nobody even wants to see it. Nobody wants to pay money. Nobody wants to hear it. And other stories, we can't get it enough. We'll go see it many, many times, or we'll read the book several times, or whatever it is. What makes a story great? And she said in a very, very simple way. She said, it's simple. If there's no conflict, there's no story. If there's no conflict, if there's nothing to push against, whether it's internal, like I got stuff in me I got to overcome, or external, I got people I got to get over or get by or get through or whatever, there's got to be some kind of conflict for there to be a good story, which makes sense. Because as great as a day as it would be to sleep in, eat what you want for breakfast, and take a nap in the afternoon, nobody's paying to see that story, right? Nobody's lining up to hear you tell that story. It's a great story, but there's no conflict. There's got to be something that you're pushing against. Now, I hope I'm not going to spoil anything for you. But I found out as we were talking about stories, every great story that you've ever heard follows the same basic process. Like the bones underneath it, it's the same skeleton, right? Like we all look different. We all are different sizes and shapes and everything else. But the bones that we have are pretty much all the same. It's the same when it comes to stories. Every great story you've ever heard has the same structure. Whether you like Harry Potter or the Marvel movies or Star Wars or Hunger Games, whatever it is you like, they all have the same basic structure. Donald Miller was the first one that I saw that made this plain to me. And he says, in essence, there is a process that they all go through. And this will make sense in a minute, but I want to show you this process that every great story runs through, because this is the same for every story. And so I'm walking through it as Luke Skywalker. I know you can't read the little things, but basically there's a character or a hero. In my Star Wars version, this is Luke Skywalker. And this character, this hero, whoever it is, ends up having some kind of problem, right? He finds out that there's a princess that needs to be rescued. So he's going to rescue the princess, but he doesn't know how. He needs help. He runs into a guide. Again, in the Star Wars story, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? All right. So Luke Skywalker wants to rescue the princess, can't do it on his own. He meets a guide, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then they come up with a plan. Now, I'm going to geek out on you a little bit, so if you're not a Star Wars person, just hang in there with me. Their plan is to get on the Millennium Falcon and go to Alderaan, okay? Now, if you don't know the story, long story short, Alderaan gets blown up. There's nothing there, right? So they're on their way. They got their plan, and then something changes, and they have to take action. They've got to do something. They're forced into doing something. And so whatever your favorite story is, as you think about this grid, it's true for your story too. There was a guide, there was a moment, there was a plan, and then there was this decisive, critical moment. And they decide they've got to save the princess. And to do that, they have to destroy the Death Star. And everything hangs in the balance, right? If you win, it's a huge success. It's a happy ending in the Star Wars story. Everybody is free. If you lose, we all become slaves of the Empire. The world's over. It's terrible for everyone. Every story you love follows this exact same pattern. There's a character that has a problem, that meets a guide, that gets a plan, and then they're forced into action, and the stakes are really high on whether they succeed or fail. That's every story, and we love it. We love it. We come back to it again and again and again. We love that story. And the reason we love it is because it's your life. It's your life. There's things that you want, and you run into problems, and you meet people and things and resources along the way, and you make plans, and you put them into action, and then there's big stakes on what happens. Did you marry the right person? Did you choose the right career? Did you make the right decision about your health? I mean, there's huge stakes involved. It's your story. That's why we love it. We love it because it's our story. Here's the problem. It doesn't always have a happy ending. Or let me say it this way. It doesn't have as many happy endings as we would like it to. We get the story. The problem is it feels like a lot of times we end up with the bad stakes, not the good stakes. We end up with the negative version of the story, not the happy ending. We don't get enough happy endings. But I want to tell you something. If you're a follower of Jesus, and I know that sometimes it doesn't feel like it, and sometimes it feels like the world's crashing in around you, you already have the happy ending. You absolutely do. If you're a follower of Jesus, you already have the happy ending. There's never going to be a time, no matter what happens to you, no matter where you go, no matter how good or how bad things get, that you are going to lose the happy ending. And what's so cool about it is, much like Star Wars, your story, anybody else's story, it eventually becomes bigger than them. It starts off as you or just Luke Skywalker. But eventually, the story impacts hundreds, dozens, thousands of people. Here's the deal. If you're a follower of Jesus, this is something that you can say. This is something that needs to be true in your life. My story is his story. My story, the story of my life, it's really not the story of my life. It's Jesus' story. It's his story. It's what he did. It's the stakes that he overcame. My story is his story if I'm a follower of Jesus. Now, why do I tell you all that? Well, we're in the middle of this Blessed series, and we've been talking about Blessed for several weeks now, and really what we want to do is to really recognize two things. We have been blessed, and one of the things that happens when we're blessed is God wants to use us to bless other people. So we've been blessed so that we can bless others. And we've said this a lot of different ways, but we want to bring people back to God. We want to help bring people back to God, not just hope they come back to God. So we started off by asking you to identify who are the people in your life. Who are the people that you rub shoulders with every day? Whether it's at work, at school, in the office, in your neighborhood, wherever you happen to go, the coffee shop you like to go to. Who are the people that you rub shoulders with every day that God is asking you to be a blessing in their life? And for most of us, that's not too hard to identify. We can come up with 4 or 5 folks pretty easily that are in our life. People that we want to see become followers of Jesus. The struggle becomes, how do I help them do that? Instead of just cross my fingers and hope that they do that. Because the stakes are so high. The stakes are so high for the life they live here and then the life they live later. The life they have in Christ and the life they can have in heaven with God for eternity, or the life they live in frustration and then eventually separated from God in hell for the rest of eternity. You can't get bigger stakes than this. See, this story is really important. And my story is his story. But when it comes to this idea of blessed, like I said, so often we're like, I don't know what to do. It's not that I'm unwilling to do anything. I don't know what to do. So he said, hey, let's just use this word and let it remind us of how we can take action. So the B reminds us to begin with prayer. Those people that you're caring about, those people that you want to see become followers of Jesus, the very first thing you can do for them to bless them is to simply start praying for them. I'm going to pray for God's best in their life. I'm going to pray for God to make himself seen by them, for them to understand who he is. I'm going to pray for them. And as I pray for them, the next thing I can do, the L in bless stands for listen. I can listen to them. What's going on in your life? Where are you at? Instead of listening to correct or listening to see if they agree with me or listening to make sure they have the same opinions I do or the same morality I do, I just want to hear you. What's going on in your life? Where are you at? Why are you making the choices that you make? What do you care about? What's important to you? And you might think that doesn't really seem, that important. But think about it. How do you feel when somebody really listens to you and you walk away knowing you were heard? It's a blessing. And one of the things we can do to bless people is actually listen to them. And then 2 weeks ago, we talked about we can eat with them, which is everybody's favorite, right? It's like, I do that all the time. We can eat with people. How is eating with someone a blessing? It's an opportunity to develop a relationship. And we said this before. We usually don't eat with people by choice unless we want to be with them, right? We don't eat with people we don't like being around unless our boss makes us, right? We just don't do that. So I'm going to begin by praying for them. I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to carve out some time to eat with them because I want to build a relationship with them. And so far, none of these are hard. Right? Can I pray for people? Yeah, I can do that. Can I listen to someone? I've got to focus a little bit and concentrate, but yeah, I can do that. Can I eat with people? Well, I've been doing it my whole life. I think, I can probably keep doing it. And then next week, the last week we talked about was serve. I'm going to serve them. Which, if I'm hanging out with them and developing a relationship, if I'm listening to them, if I'm praying for them, the serving's going to come pretty easy. I'm gonna find things that are going on in their life that I can help with, that I can make a difference with, where I can actually come alongside and just simply help them in some form or fashion. So these first four are pretty straightforward. And these are credible ways to bless people in your life. But to be honest, it's the last one where a lot of us get hung up. The last S in the word bless is share your story. You share your story. This is what happened to me. And for a lot of reasons, we can get hung up on that. But before we get into all of that, here's what I want to kind of plant in your brain. If you have a story of following Jesus, your story is worth sharing. And it is an incredible blessing to other people when you are willing to share your story. I know it's not always easy. I know it can feel awkward, and we're going to talk about that. But sharing your story is that difference maker. Because it's easy to believe, it's easy to think that if I'm a nice person, if I do good things, if I try to be moral, and if I work hard to just really love and care for the people around me, then I won't have to say anything. They'll just kind of get it somehow. But they never do. We have to share our stories. And we'll talk about that. But we have to share our stories because we share stories that are worth telling, and your story is worth telling. Now, what we want to do this morning, if you've got a Bible or if you're in the app, we're going to be in John chapter 9. And what I want to do is look at somebody else's story because I think we can learn a lot from this man's story. And I'll be honest with you, we don't even know his name. We don't know this man's name, but we do know his story. And I think his story can inform us, help us, kind of give us some clarity around our own story of following Jesus. So it's in John chapter 9. If you're in the app, you can kind of dial up the sermon notes and follow it there. If you got a Bible, John 9. And we're going to dive in. It's a long story, so I'm going to encourage you to hang with me. But you need to know what was going on before this happened. You see, right before this moment, Jesus made an incredible statement. He told everyone that was willing to listen, I am the Son of God. And that's a controversial statement. And a lot of people were upset and stirred up about this. And you might think, well, that was, back in olden times or whatever. No, it's still the same today. People love a Jesus that pats kids on the head, that heals people, that's nice to everybody, that teaches people interesting and important things for their life. But what gets controversial is when people say, no, Jesus was God. That's when people start to feel like, oh, wait a minute. I mean, if Jesus is God, then that means like I might have to live different. I might have to do some different things. I mean, if he's just a good guy, if he's a nice person, he's a historical figure, no big deal. He's God in the flesh. I don't know if I can get on board with that. That's where it becomes controversial. So just like then is now, it was controversial. He makes this statement that he's the Son of God. And Jesus was so smart. I know, and I say this all the time. We underestimate how smart Jesus was. He was the smartest person to ever walk on this planet. And Jesus comes along and he says, I'm the Son of God. And he knows it's going to be controversial. And then the very next thing he does is something that nobody had ever seen done before. Nobody had ever seen this. And it was almost as if Jesus was saying, look, anybody can make this claim, but I'm going to give you some evidence to back up what I just said. I'm not asking you to believe in me like you believe in fairy tales and Santa Claus. I'm asking you to believe in something real. And I'm going to give you the evidence that you need to back up the claim that I just made so that you are forced to make a decision about who I am. John chapter 9. It's an incredible story. Like I said, we don't even know this guy's name, but what we do know is after he met Jesus, he had a story that he was going to tell the rest of his life. Starts off this way. It says, as he is talking about Jesus, as he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Which is an awful question, all right? We're just going to kind of make some comments as we go here. It's a horrible question. This guy's got something wrong with him, so obviously he sinned or his parents sinned or he wouldn't have anything wrong with him. we look at that and we're just kind of horrified. Who would think that way? But this was their culture. And just like we got some things wrong with our culture, they had some things wrong in their culture, okay? And the mindset of the day was if somebody has a physical problem or a physical issue or disease, it's because they did something wrong or somebody in their family did something wrong. That was just a way they thought, okay? So they're coming at it from the wrong angle, but this question actually gives Jesus an opportunity to do something incredible. Look at verse 3. Jesus said, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in him. As long as it's day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." And after saying this, he spit on the ground, he made some mud with the saliva and put it in the man's eyes. Stop right there. This is gross, okay? There's no getting around it. This is gross. And then he stuck it in his eye, okay? He didn't just rub it on his hand or just kind of, pat him on the back. He rubbed it in his eye. The guy's blind, and it's probably a good thing because I don't think he would have let him do it if he knew what was coming, right? He spit on the ground, he made some mud. You got a lot of spit to make mud, and he's smearing it in the guy's eye. Again, this is really strange to us. Again, in their culture, though, they believed that saliva actually had some healing properties. So there was some stuff to this. Now, it wasn't Jesus' spit that healed him. It wasn't the sand that he picked up. It was the power of God that is going to heal this man. But Jesus did it in such a way that the people around him would see Jesus at work. But it is gross, okay? There's no getting around it. It is gross. Verse 7, after he rubbed we'll call it mud, in his eyes, "Go," he told him, "wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went and he washed and he came home seeing. This Siloam is so significant to me. The word means sent, and Jesus sends him to this pool. Jesus had just claimed that he was sent by God, and in a few chapters, Jesus is going to send his followers out to the rest of the world. This whole sending idea is incredibly important. It's going to come back to us when we start talking about our story and what we are sent to do and where we are sent to go. In verse 8, his neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" And some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, he only looks like him." But he insisted, "I'm the man." "Well, how then were your eyes open?" they asked him. And he replied, "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash, so I went and washed, and then I could see." "Where is this man?" they asked him. "I don't know," he said. "I was blind, remember? I don't know where I was. Somebody had to walk me to the pool because I don't even know what the pool looks like because, again, blind all my life. Well, where is he? What does he look like? I don't know, I'm blind." And the neighbors are arguing. Like, "You're the blind man." No, that's not him. Like, "Yes, it's me. Remember, blind, now I can see." "No, you're not him." They couldn't decide. His change was so profound. His life was so changed and different because of this encounter with Jesus that people that knew him weren't sure if he was still the same guy. I mean, we see some stuff. There are some things about you that look familiar. I mean, you're kind of wearing the same clothes. You seem like the same guy, but you're so different. I can't be sure. Are you really the blind guy? Really? Because I'm not sure. You've changed. You're not the same guy. And he's insisting, "Yes, I am." And he's simply telling his story. "Yeah, you notice that I'm different. Yeah, you notice something's happened, but it's me. It's me. I was blind, but now I can see." Verse 13, they brought him to the Pharisees. These are kind of the people that are in charge. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. "He put mud on my eyes," the man replied, "and I washed, and now I see." He's just telling his story over and over again. And some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others asked, "How can a sinner perform such signs?" And they were divided. And they turned again to the blind man. "What do you have to say about him? It was your eyes he opened." And the man replied, and I think this was probably almost as much a question as it was a comment. They're saying, "Who is he? What is he all about?" And he's like, "He's a prophet." He started off with, "Well, he's a good man. And this man told me he made mud. He put it in my eyes. He's a good guy. He told me to go wash. So I did." "Okay, well, who do you say he is?" Maybe he's a prophet. I don't know for sure." Verse 18, they still did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. "Is this your son?" they asked. "Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that he can now see?" "We know he's our son," the parents answered, "and we know he was born blind. But how he can see now or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He's of age. In other words, he's an adult. He's a grown-up. You can ask him. He'll speak for himself. But there's a reason they said that. Verse 22, his parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who had already decided that anyone who acknowledged Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. That is why his parents said, he is of age, ask him. Now, if you're this guy, at some point this starts to get frustrating, right? You're like, they're asking you questions I can't answer. I don't remember, blind. I don't know. I just, this is what happened to me. All I know is what happened, and this is what happened. And then your neighbors, the people you've been living around your whole life are like, that's not really you. No, it is. It's me. Can somebody be happy, that I can see you now? And like, let's get some official people involved here. And so they bring him to the Pharisees, the in charge, the influencers, and they're asking him questions. Nobody seems excited that the man can see, which is like, it's a big deal, right? His life was changed. Well, how? Why? Tell us about the science. Tell us about what happened. Who did this? How did they do it? Again, blind, and then went and washed my eyes. I don't know. And then finally, even his own parents, they basically bail out on him. Like, he's our son, yes. He was blind, yes. He can see now. I mean, it looks like it. If you throw him a ball, he'll catch it. I mean, how it happened, I don't know. And we're frankly too intimidated by you to speak up for him. So you should just talk to him again. And this poor man has had this incredible change happen in his life. And all along the way, people are just questioning and doubting and telling him why it's not true. And he just keeps telling his story. He just keeps telling his story. Verse 24. A second time, they summoned the man who had been blind. Give glory to God by telling the truth. That's kind of their way of saying, under oath. We know this man is a sinner. And he replied, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. And they asked him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered, I've told you already, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? And now he gets a little sassy. Do you want to become his disciples too? And they hurled insults at him and said, you're this fellow's disciple. We're disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. And the man, I think, getting a little bolder by the moment, he answered, that's remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners. He listens to a godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a blind man. If this man was not from God, he could do nothing. And to this they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out. We're done with you. The fact that something incredible happened, we don't care. You can't explain it the way we want it explained. We don't want to hear it. And he just keeps telling his story. I love it. Look at verse 35 as this kind of winds up. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out. He's talking about they had thrown him out of the synagogue. He was thrown out of society. He couldn't go to church anymore. And a lot of people in that community would see him as dead now. You've heard the expression, you're dead to me. That's the phrase that they would be thinking about. That's what it means when they threw him out. Jesus comes into his life. Something incredible happens to him. And the rest of his family and community throw him out because of what happens. Jesus found they had thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? Again, I'm thinking he's probably thinking, again, blind. Who is he, sir? The man asked, tell me so that I may believe in him. And Jesus said, you have now seen him. In fact, he's the one speaking to you. And the man said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. What is really intriguing to me is how Jesus changed throughout his story. Jesus didn't change, but the way this man understood who Jesus was kept changing. And the reason it's so fascinating to me is because I know it's true for me, it's probably true for you, and it's gonna be true for anybody that you share your story with. Jesus started out as a good man. He's a good man that did something good. And then later he said, well, he's a prophet maybe. Maybe he's like a preacher or somebody that God speaks through. And then after that, he was somebody that was sent from God. He was a good man, and then he was kind of a religious guy and a guy that spoke for God, and now he's somebody that God actually sent him. And now at the very end of the story, he sees who he really is. He worships him. He sees him as God, his Savior, the one who changed his life. You see, if you summed up the man's story, it seems so simple and so small. I was blind, but now I see. I was physically blind. I could not see. I couldn't tell you what somebody looked like. I couldn't tell you what a place looked like. I don't know what trees look like or dogs or anything. I've been blind, and now I can see physically. But it was deeper than that. It was much deeper than that. It was great that he got his sight back. Don't get me wrong. That's a phenomenal, miraculous, incredible kind of thing. But the real miracle was somebody that was found by Jesus, that was blind, that didn't understand life, that all he had known is frustration. All he had known was difficulty. All he had known was having to rely on everybody else. That internally was most likely frustrated. Maybe it was anger. Maybe he was bitter. Maybe he saw it as his fault. Maybe he believed the lies that it must have been my parents. It must have been me. All I've known of life has been bad. And I met Jesus. I was blind. Now I see. I see who Jesus is. I see the difference he makes. And I'm going to worship him and I'm going to follow him. Because spiritually I was blind, but now spiritually I can see. What was his story? Well, I was blind, but now I can see. That was his story. And where do you come into this? You see, if you're a follower of Jesus, your story is just like his story. Just like every great story follows a pattern, his story follows a pattern, and your story follows a pattern. When you think about sharing your story as a way of trying to bless somebody else, I want to challenge you to think of it in 3 simple steps, just like this man's story. So the first part of your story is my life before Jesus. For this guy, it was very straightforward. My life before Jesus, I was blind. Now you can fill it in. You can put some stuff with it. I was discouraged. I was disappointed. I was depressed. I had a lot of self-doubt. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know why I was here. I didn't know why God allowed this to happen to me. I mean, you could fill in all kinds of stuff with his story. And you can fill in all kinds of stuff with your story. What was your life like before you met Jesus? What did it look like? How did it go? What were the good things and what were the bad things? And for some of you, you might say, well, I kind of grew up in church. And I've been going to church a long time. Me too. I've gone to church literally my whole life. When I was born, they brought me as soon as they could bring me, and I've been going ever since. I became a follower of Jesus when I was 7. So it's like, well, what do you say then when it's like my life before Jesus? Well, let me put it to you this way. What was your life like before you got serious about following Jesus? And to be honest, this isn't the most important part of your story. It's good, and you want to put in some detail, and you want to share that part of your story, but it's not the most important part of the story. This is who I was. This is where I was. The second part is the easy part, how I met Jesus. What happened? How did I meet Jesus? For this guy, it's very simple. Well, I was sitting there, and Jesus came up to me and rubbed junk in my eyes. That's how I found Jesus, right? But what about you? How did you find him? Was it a friend? Was it a family member? Was it maybe some hard experiences? You know, for a lot of us, it's the hit bottom and then realize there's got to be something better. It's got to be a different life. It's got to be more than this. And that's how I met Jesus. Or maybe yours is kind of complicated and you look back and you say, well, it was really 3 or 4 things together that happened. And then, as a result of those things happening, that's how I finally met Jesus. Whatever it is, how did you meet Jesus? Just like this man. Well, I was sitting there. I was blind and I was sitting there and that's how I met Jesus. And then the third piece of the story, my life since I met Jesus. And this is where you're going to spend most of your time. My life since I met Jesus. How is it different? Well, for him, very straightforward. I was blind, now I see. I can see. Well, what about you? How is your life different since you met Jesus? For a lot of us, I think that those answers are you may have the dramatic story. I was over here and I was, this was my life and this is what it looked like and it was hard, it was ugly, and everybody in society even would give up on me. But for many of us, that's not our story. For many of us, our story is more along the lines of I used to be really angry and I took it out on the people around me and I've found peace. I used to have a really hard time forgiving people. If somebody did something wrong, if they hurt me or hurt somebody in my family, I could not forgive them. I held a grudge like you wouldn't believe, and I spent my whole life thinking about how I could get them back and how I could make them look bad, and that's changed. Or maybe it's more internal. I never knew why I was here. I always doubted myself. I was filled with anxiety. I always had kind of this nagging feeling that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't good enough, that there was something wrong with me and something wrong with my life. And then I met Jesus. And it's different now. How has your life changed since you met Jesus? Because it is different. And I think sometimes we kind of feel like it has to have the fairy tale version of it. And it really doesn't. Because the way your story is going to bless somebody else is when you share both the good and the hard things. I went through this hard thing. I went through this tough time. I went through this situation with my family or in my marriage or with my friend, and it wasn't great and it wasn't always pretty, but Jesus led me through that, and it has changed everything for me. So what is your story? It's actually just like this man's story. It's straightforward. It's simple. What I was like before Jesus, how I met Jesus, and my life since I met Jesus. That's your story. Now, my guess is if you're like me, you've had those moments where you wanted to share your story, or you wanted to share part of your story. You felt like in this conversation, in this moment, I should probably say something as a follower of Jesus, but for some reason, you held back. You didn't. You kind of look back and you think, man, I blew it. I should have said something, or I should have done something. I know I had that chance, and I didn't take it. I know I've had that. I've had it dozens of times. It happens all the time to me. So why do we do that? If we have this great story, why do we hold back sometimes? And I think there's a couple of reasons. I just want to kind of put them out there and help you see some ways around them, because I've struggled with these too. And the first one is, for a lot of us, we think, I don't have all the answers. I mean, what if it's like with the Pharisees and this guy, and they keep asking him, like, explain it. He's like, I don't know. And we feel like if we say we don't know, we're going to mess it up. It's not true at all. Listen, I've been following Jesus a long time. I've been reading the Bible a long time. I went to school to be a pastor, and you know what? I don't have all the answers. And if that's not enough, Pastor Corey doesn't have all the answers either. We don't know everything. We don't have every question answered. We have doubts. We have struggles. Nobody knows all the answers. But here's what Jesus said. When you're willing to speak for me, I'll put the words in your mouth. I'll put the words in your mouth. You don't have to have all the answers. This guy could not answer scientifically why he could see. In a lot of ways, he couldn't even answer spiritually why he could see. He definitely couldn't answer medically why he could see. He just knew what happened to him. And he told his story. And it's the same way for us. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to be able to explain everything. We don't have to argue everyone. Most people don't get argued into faith. You just share your story. This is what Jesus did for me. Second one is I don't want to impose my beliefs on other people. A lot of times we're kind of like, well, religion is a touchy subject and people have all kinds of opinions and I don't want to impose what I believe on someone else. And for me anyway, sometimes we picture somebody kind of trying to jam the Bible down somebody's throat and judging them and criticizing them and yelling at them and the guy on the corner that you're all going to hell if you don't change, and sometimes that helps, but the honest truth is most of the time it doesn't help. It doesn't. And if you're thinking, I don't want to be that person, good. I don't want you to be that person. I want you to be the person that simply shares your story. And think about it this way. If you hit a rough time financially in your life and somebody came alongside you and helped you, maybe you got involved with a financial planner or somebody that helped you, a credit counselor or something like that, and it really helped you, and you bump into a friend that's having similar struggles, wouldn't you tell them your story? Hey, you know what? That happened to me, and I know this guy. I know a guy that can help you. You should try them. You should talk to them, because here's what happened to me, and they helped me, and now things are better. It's the same thing. That's exactly what we're talking about when we say share your story. It's not arguing, it's not manipulating, it's not debating. It's simply saying, I know a guy. I have had some hard times too, and I know a guy that's changed things for me. And he can change things for you too. That's not imposing your beliefs on anyone. In Romans chapter 10, Paul kind of starts to talk about this and what this looks like. And I want to take a minute just to walk through this verse with you. Romans 10:13. He starts at the end. He says, for everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. So in essence, he's saying anybody that believes and trusts in Jesus, Jesus has promised that he will save them. He will change their life. And that's what we want, right? That's for the people that you know, your friends, your family members, your brother or sister, your cousin, the person you're praying for. This is what you want. You want them to get to this place. How does it happen? Paul just kind of steps through it. He says, how can they call on the one, how can, was that me? Yeah, okay. How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? Very simple. I'm not going to trust somebody that I don't even believe in, right? And that's true. That's not a Bible thing. That's a people thing, right? I don't trust people if I don't believe in them. If I haven't seen reliability, if I don't think they're responsible, I don't trust in them. And so Paul's saying, look, nobody's going to trust in Jesus if they don't believe in him. All right, that makes sense. And how can they believe in the one in whom they have not heard? Well, that makes sense too. It's really hard for me to believe in you or believe in somebody, to believe in anybody, if I've never even heard about them, right? They don't exist as far as I'm concerned. I've never heard a word about them. So I have to hear about them before I can believe in them, and I have to believe in them before I can trust them. And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And a lot of times we get hung up on this preaching thing. We're like, well, if I have to stand up on the stage and do what you're doing, then I'm out. I'm not going to do that. That's not what this word means here. What this word means is very simple. It means to tell people about God. That's all it means. And it happens more often one-on-one than it does one on a bunch. So how can they hear about Jesus without someone preaching, telling them about God? How are they going to hear that? Well, that makes sense. And then finally, and how can they preach? How can they tell someone about God unless they are sent? And we just talked about Jesus sent this man to wash. Jesus was sent to us. And then Jesus turns around and sends his followers out to live as witnesses, to share their story. As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. As much as we would like to think that as long as I live a good life and I'm a nice guy, everything will work out fine and other people will see Jesus because I'm such a good person, it's not true. Jesus commands us as his followers, share your story. Be a witness. And again, we complicate it. We imagine all these things and all these scenarios and make it hard. And the reality is, it's just as simple as, this is what I was like. Here's how I met Jesus. And this is what I'm like now. And when we share that very simple story, it blesses other people and it helps bring them back to God. The last one is it makes us uncomfortable. It makes me feel uncomfortable. Yes, it does. Let's just be honest about it. It can feel uncomfortable to talk about faith things and belief things because it's not something we talk about a lot. And so sometimes when you see two people sharing their story and they're talking about what Jesus done for them, it looks like two nervous people talking. And that's true, it does. But again, I want to take you back to your card. Those 5 people, those 10 people that you're praying for, that you're listening to, that you're eating with, that you're serving. Isn't it worth being just a little bit uncomfortable with them and sharing your story to help bring them back to God? Because the stakes are so high. There's so much hanging in the balance. And Jesus says, if you will do something as simple as share your story, I will take it and I will work it into their hearts and I will bring them back to me. You see, it's worth being a little bit uncomfortable. So I want to challenge you this week, share your story. Be as quick to share your story as you are to pray for them. Be as quick to share your story as you are to listen or to eat or to serve them. And let those things put in the hands of God bring other people back to him. Now, I want to share with you a quick little video that's going to be going out on Facebook here well, it's actually already out. And the reason I want to share this with you, this is an easy way that you can begin to share your story, and you can do it with a click. Now, this isn't all I want you to do, but this is something easy anyone can do. If you follow Mountain Ridge on social media, you're going to start seeing these things come along. We're putting them out as ads. We're also putting them on our Facebook account because we want to communicate to our community that we are like you. We are your neighbors, and we have a place for you here. We have something to share with you. And so I want you to watch this ad, and here's what I really want you to do. I want you to be on the lookout. And as you're scrolling, if you're on social and you see this, like it, share it, and use it as a simple way, a very simple way to let people know, hey, I have found a place that's made a difference in my life, and it can make a difference in your life too. Take a look. We're going to release a half dozen or more of these over the next several weeks and months, actually, and you're going to see them. And I want to encourage you, help put it in front of people. An easy way to start a conversation with your neighbors, hey, I want to send you something. Hey, I want you to look at something. And it gives them an opportunity to begin to interact with our church. It's a fantastic way that you can begin to share your story. Let's pray together, and then we're going to continue to worship.